Okay, so we're going to talk about polynomials. Make that a little bit bigger. Let me give you an example of a polynomial. 3x to the fourth power plus 2x squared minus x minus 7. That's an example of a polynomial. And so what we can have is we can have these terms, call those terms, we'll talk about that in a little bit, that are being added and subtracted together. Now, one thing I want to point out right now, though, is these exponents that we have, it's an exponent of 1 there, they have to be non-negative integers, okay? So like a whole number. You can't have a fraction up there. I mean, we worked with some expressions in the last video where we had exponents that were fractions, and we had exponents that were negative, but in a polynomial, no. The polynomials have to be whole numbers, or the exponents have to be whole numbers in order for it to be a polynomial. Now, kind of our general form for a polynomial is a sub n x to the nth plus a sub, and then it would be the next one. And then the book writes it a little bit different, but that's okay. Most books write it this way. A sub 1, I'll explain all this in a minute. Okay, so that's kind of the general form for a polynomial. And all of these are just whole numbers. Now, when we have an n like that down there, that's called a subscript. Okay, so a sub n would be some, real number. It could be a real number. It could be pi. It could be 3/2. It could be 7. We like it when they're integers, but, and then the next term's gonna have a number in front of it. It could be 1, could be 0, okay? And then it keeps going until you get to the last term that has an x to the first power, and then finally the constant at the end. Now, these exponents are going in descending order. So it goes like my polynomial here started with a 4, then it went to 3, then a 2, and then 1. And you're like, wait a minute, there's no 3, there's no x cubed. Well, that meant then the a sub n minus 1 was 0, okay? All right, so all polynomials could be written in a form like this. Don't worry too much about that form, but I just wanted to point out that is the general form. And I wanted to point out that these are called subscripts. They're not exponents. They're just to designate between different numbers, okay? These up here where we have exponents, those are called superscripts, by the way. Okay, so standard form, and it has to do with what we were doing right here, standard form for a polynomial says these exponents, they have to go from largest to smallest. And then your constant, if you're going to have just a constant at the end that doesn't have a variable, that should be at the end, okay? All right, so standard form exponents are in descending order. So you put your biggest exponent first. Terms. Terms are things that are added or subtracted. Okay, so in my example up here, I had 1, 2, 3, 4 terms, okay? I don't know if I should have circled them, but okay. The coefficient is all the a sub whatevers, okay? They use an I, but a sub n minus 1, a sub 1, a sub 0, all of those are coefficients. So in my example, my coefficient is, on the first term is 3, and then the next term had a coefficient of 2, and the next one had a coefficient of -1, and then the last one was -7. You can think of it as a coefficient. It's a constant because it doesn't have the variable. But, all right, so sometimes we get a little tangled up in some of the terminology. Okay, a monomial is when you just, mono meaning one, it's when you just have one term. So I could have like 5x to the 9th power. That would be a monomial. There's no adding or subtracting of other terms. It's just one term. One term. A binomial, well, bi meaning two, so it's when you have two terms. So I might have like x plus 3. That would be considered a binomial. It's a really nice binomial, x plus 3, but it's when we have two terms. A trinomial, well, you'll never guess, but it's when you have 3 terms. So you could have a trinomial like 3x squared plus 7x plus 10. That would be considered a trinomial. Now, you could get into a bunch of, well, what if there's missing terms or something like that? And we're not going to worry too much about that right now, but we do use these terms monomial, binomial, and trinomial a bit. So I just want to go over what they mean. So hopefully when we work with them, and I say, hey, here's a trinomial, everybody knows, oh, okay, that's 3 terms. Okay. The degree. The degree of a polynomial is the highest exponent. Now, right now, our polynomials are in one variable. You'll notice I used x. It doesn't have to be x, but all of my polynomials so far were just in terms of the variable was x. That was it, okay? We say then these polynomials have one variable, okay? All right, so if I go to this trinomial here I had a minute ago, and I said, hey, what's the degree of that? The degree, I'll write it again. The degree is 2, or it's a second degree polynomial because that's the highest exponent, okay? The leading term is the one with the highest exponent. So for my example, the leading term was this one right there, 3x squared in my example, okay? The leading coefficient is the number in front of the variable, okay? So for my example, the leading coefficient was 3, okay? All right, so I think let's see, is there more terminology? No, but as I talk and you hear it in the videos, you'll start picking it up, okay, well, that's what the leading coefficient is, and that's what the leading term is, and we have an example in the next video.